So I want to thank everybody for being here today to talk about this kind of really important and quite successful program, assisted outpatient treatment. I think from the introductions from folks on the Zoom, Laura, you could hear that District 7 has a lot of folks that really care and want to help those who are in need of assistance. And we are often just struggling to find the right way. And that's when I learned more about your program. I really wanted to make sure that we got the details of this out to our constituents so that they can understand what this does and how it can be utilized. So I'm going to ask everybody to please go on mute, hold your questions until the end, and we're going to turn it over to Laura to introduce herself and then go into her presentation, and then we will do Q&A at the end. So take it away, Laura. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Councilor Fiebelkorn, for the invitation to come and share our program with your constituents and the community at large. And so, as mentioned, my name is Laura Braun. I'm the program manager for the Assisted Outpatient Treatment Program. We are a civil division treatment program with the 2nd Judicial District Court. Our program is presided over by Judge Beatrice Brickhouse. And so I thought it would be really helpful to go through some information about what our program is, what it isn't, how to gain access to it, the individuals that we're trying to support and service. And so I'm going to go ahead and start my PowerPoint, and then I'm happy to take any and all questions afterwards that you may have. So let me just start sharing here. Give me 1 second. Oh, all right. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, thanks so much. So I thought that I would start by just talking about what the purpose and goals for assisted outpatient treatment, I'll just refer to it as AOT for short. And so, as I had mentioned before, we provide community-based mental health treatment through civil court commitment. And so what we're trying to do is for individuals who have a serious mental illness, who struggle with voluntary treatment adherence, what we do is we try to connect them to treatment while simultaneously having those providers pretty intensely engage with these individuals. And so we're really trying to leverage the power of the court and what we call the black robe effect to gain some adherence and connection to treatment. And so what we hope is that through that, we'll be able to reduce these individuals' incidents of coming in and out of our hospital systems, in and out of our criminal justice system, and help with housing these individuals and hopefully getting them into some form of housing and off of the streets to reduce incidences of victimization or violence. And with that, we hope that we're going to be reducing the financial strain on some of these systems. So maybe reducing the financial burden of our hospitals, our police and emergency system forces, while simultaneously supporting individuals maintain a level of stability in the community so we can help them achieve some of the personal goals that they might have. One of the things that I do really like to enforce is that AOT is a civil division treatment program, and that makes us a little bit different than some treatment courts individuals in the community might be familiar with through our criminal division. And so with this being civil, we don't want an individual to have to commit a crime in order to take access to this program. And so individuals can come into this program through the community, but yes, they can also come through the criminal justice system or through our hospital system, but that is not a mandatory step into AOT. And so this is a form of civil commitment. And so I think most people are familiar with civil commitment in a hospital. So someone has become a danger to themselves or others. They go into one of our local hospitals. They get admitted. And despite maybe them not wanting to be there, a court order is granted, mandating them to care on an inpatient basis. This is very similar, with the exception that we are mandating to someone to treatment on an outpatient basis through intensive community-based wraparound services. And so because we are civil, we are not sanction based. So our goal is to keep people out of these systems. We don't want to be punitive or punish them by maybe not necessarily adhering the way we want by forcing them into fines or sanctions or jail time, anything like that. And so some people may think, oh, well, then what are your teeth, AOT, if you can't have these sanctions and do these things? And so we do have some consequences for individuals who may not want to comply with our program, who are court ordered in. And so one of those is if we find that someone is not wanting to connect and a result of that is a deterioration of their condition, then we can order them to be picked up for an evaluation. And if based on that evaluation, they need to have that hospitalization to restabilize them, to be able to bring them back into the community, we do have that option where our judge can order those emergency valuations and pickup orders. Another thing may be we really, as I had mentioned before, try to utilize that black robe effect. And so if we find that someone is struggling, then frequent and more FaceTime with our judge might be an ask of them. So it's kind of like, maybe the more resistant you are, the more you may see our judge. Maybe the more successful you are in participating in your treatment plan, that might result in you having less time before our judge. And so the other thing is perhaps an increase in our treatment provider intervention. And so the more that you're in crisis, the more we're going to wrap around you. And the better you do, we kind of try to step back and kind of let them take the reins a little bit more and have a little bit more space. And so I think one of the things that sets AOT apart from other community-based programs is that community-based programs are voluntary. Substance abuse treatment is voluntary. Therapy, medication, all of these things are voluntary. And so I think that we tend to have these frustrations and struggles and seeing these people kind of revolve in and out of these emergency systems, only coming back into the community and not being willing to voluntarily comply. Whereas AOT can step in for certain individuals and under certain circumstances and order them into a treatment plan that we supervise, and we don't make it so easy to say no. You may be saying no, but we're saying yes for you anyway. Is kind of the emphasis of AOT. I think it's really helpful for individuals to know what our criteria is. And because we are a court program, we do have jurisdictional boundaries. And so we are based out of the Bernalillo County District Court. And so one of the requirements is that the individual reside in Bernalillo County. This is an adult program, and so they have to be 18 or older. And this is a program for individuals struggling with a severe mental illness. And so that diagnosis has to be the primary diagnosis. I will say that we do tend to have quite a few individuals who have co-occurring diagnosis, which means a mental health diagnosis and a substance abuse diagnosis, but that mental health has to be primary. And because of their mental health diagnosis, it has to have led to them being hospitalized 2 or more times in the last 4 years, arrested 2 or more times in the last 4 years, having an episode of harm to self or others in the last 4 years, or having a long period of time either in a hospital setting or in a incarcerated setting. And so those are we're really looking at someone's history over that last 4-year period of time where their mental health is really impacting their ability to successfully maintain in the community. The other thing that we're looking for is, can they voluntarily adhere to treatment. And if there is evidence to suggest that they can successfully take meds on their own, or they can successfully interact with treatment in some variety, or we believe that they can, AOT is going to be more restrictive. And so we just need to make sure that this program is the least restrictive option for this individual, that if they did not have AOT, we would not be able to engage them. And then we need to also believe that they're going to benefit. And so, yes, we have this option to order this individual, despite their willingness, into a treatment plan with very intensive wraparound case management and care, but we also have to believe that they would likely benefit from AOT. And I say that because we don't necessarily have exclusionary criteria for our program, other than the mental health has to be the primary, and it has to be significant enough that it's impacting their ability to function on a day-to-day. And so I will say that the majority of individuals that we see come into our program are individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia, or schizoaffective disorder, or bipolar disorder tend to be our top 3 diagnoses that we see. And so there is some evidence, because assisted outpatient treatment is a national evidence-based program across the country. And so there is an organization that takes statistics nationwide on the success of these types of programs. And there is some recommendations. And so individuals who have more of a primary issue or diagnosis of a developmental delay don't tend to be the best candidates for AOT. There's other avenues for individuals with developmental delays to take advantage of, or people who have pretty significant we call them access to diagnoses. And so people with pretty significant personality disorders who are not going to be at all impacted by a judge or a court or that black robe effect. And so maybe people who are a little bit adverse, or have kind of like those antisocial personality disorders that aren't going to be impacted, don't tend to do well in AOT. Opposite to that, we do find people who have maybe some borderline personality disorders or other disorders that kind of fall within those categories, who are seeking out that kind of negative attention. I want to do what I can to get before this judge, or to have all of these people kind of, at my will. We don't want this program to become an adverse for them. And so individuals within kind of those categories historically have not done well in AOT. But overall, if the primary is a mental health condition, and it has impacted an individual's life in the way that this criteria lays out, then we will consider anyone with a primary mental health diagnosis. I will say that the other section of this slide is that, yes, the participant has to meet this criteria, but this is a court order, so there has to be a petitioner, someone who is seeking out this level of treatment on behalf of an individual. And so there are different options of who that individual can be. It can be an adult roommate, a parent, a spouse, an adult child, or an adult sibling. The director of a hospital where maybe that individual is hospitalized, or maybe where that individual lives, like a group home, or a qualified professional. And so that could be if someone is treating them in the hospital, in the jail, on an outpatient basis. These are usually going to be either their doctors or their medication prescribers. These individuals can all serve as a petitioner for AOT. We also do find that individuals who have these diagnoses oftentimes have a surrogate decision maker, like a treatment guardian, or a power of attorney. And so those individuals can serve as a petitioner for AOT. And so the way that the referral process goes is there are referrals that can be found on the court website. We have a section on the Second Judicial District Court website under programs, and there is a section for AOT. There is a referral that you can find there. And then our current clinical provider partner who offers the outpatient clinical services is First Nations Community Health Source. On their website, they have the same option. They have, if you go to the First Nations Community Health Source website, under services, they have a category for AOT, and they have a link to the referral. And so the first step is referring. We will accept a referral from any entity, but the referral has to identify who that petitioner is going to be. And there are spaces on there that very clearly ask for that information. And so once we receive the referral, we will respond to that referral source in 2 business days. So, yes, we got it. And yes, based on the information listed on the referral, yes or no, do they meet criteria as far as do they meet the statute for AOT? If they do, the next step is the individual has a psychiatric assessment. We try to schedule those within 5 days, 5 business days of saying, yes, this person meets criteria. And so what we do is, because this is outpatient civil commitment, we have to have a qualified professional evaluate that person, agree that they meet criteria, and agree that this is least restrictive and that this person would benefit from AOT. Provided that evaluation says yes to all of those questions, then a petition is filed with the Second Judicial District Court within 10 days of that evaluation taking place. There were some changes in this recent legislative session to AOT that's going to expand that evaluation period of time from 10 days to 30 days. That's going to happen at the end of June. And then it's also going to add a new petitioner for who can petition for AOT. That's going to add the district attorney's office can also serve as a petitioner for AOT to try to help divert some of those individuals who are currently in our criminal justice system who need treatment into AOT. So that's going to be taking place at the end of June. But once the petition is filed, then the individual is appointed legal counsel. So throughout this process, the individual that this petition is in reference to is provided legal counsel. And we set a hearing between 3 and 7 days of the petition being filed. And as I mentioned, the judge that oversees AOT is Judge Beatrice Brickhouse. She has been working with AOT since 2019, so she's highly involved, invested, and supportive of this program, and has seen the great successes that have come from it. And so provided that she feels that we have, by clear and convincing evidence, met all of the requirements, then an individual can be ordered into AOT for a period of 1 year. And so with an option to extend year over year if that individual still meets criteria for AOT. But we start with 1 year. And the reason why the program is a year is because individuals that have the type of diagnosis that this program is for generally tend to not have a lot of insight into their diagnoses. And so when we're talking about individuals who have schizophrenia, which is the primary diagnosis that we work with, oftentimes these individuals truly believe that they don't have an illness. And so if I don't have an illness, why would I have treatment? Why would I take medication? And so because of that, this program, through an evaluation and a qualified professional saying, I hear what you're saying, but I think you need it anyway, we're able to order those individuals into AOT for a year. And so when you're working with someone who has that mind thought, the progress is slow. And so we allow ourselves that at least a minimum of a year to try to build that rapport and the momentum, because steps they tend to progress fairly slowly in the beginning. And so we just want to make sure that we have enough time to work with individuals. Once an individual comes into AOT, there's always questions about now what? And so that at minimum, once someone is ordered into AOT, they come before Judge Brickhouse at minimum once every 3 months. And that allows time from hearing to hearing for our clinical provider to work with that individual to try to make some ground on those treatment plan needs. So be it housing or medication or connection to benefits or whatever services that individual needs, we can kind of see and allow that clinical provider time to make some of those next steps happen. So I will say, even though I say an individual comes before Judge Brickhouse every 3 months, one of the consequences to really not engaging in your treatment is if we feel you need to be seen before the judge or we need to staff this case with the judge more frequently, then we take those on a case-by-case basis. If we need to see you every month for a while or every 2 weeks for a while, we really kind of take those on a case-by-case basis. They do have access to legal representation over the entire course of while they're in AOT, so each individual is assigned an attorney. Those costs come from the program, so it's of no cost to the individual themselves to have that representation. And then each individual has a very specific personalized treatment plan. We really try to engage and kind of solicit what their needs and goals are. And then we also really try to work and with any support systems that they have. Family is so important with this population because oftentimes they're not able to function independently. We tend to find that many of these individuals still live with family or have a lot of family support. So to the extent that the individual will allow us to wrap that family member or that loved one in to their treatment, we definitely do try to engage those individuals. And so their treatment plan generally consists of medication is key. And so if we can't successfully get somebody on medication, it's really hard to scaffold on additional services. And so medication management is always key in trying to achieve whatever that individual's baseline is. Once we feel like we could get meds on board and we can try to maybe reduce the psychosis or maybe reduce some of those kind of more aggressive symptoms, we find that we can be more successful in trying to attempt to get them housed if they're not currently housed. We can try to get them into maybe some level of substance abuse treatment. We can try to get them in to see a doctor if they need a physical or something for their physical health. And so we tend to find that until we can get someone medicated, they're generally not in a very healthy state of mind to be able to access some of these helps and supports. So that's always key number one for us. And then just the case management piece in identifying what your individual needs and goals are. We're very community based. We do not have an expectation for the individual to come to us. We come to you. And so we have a team right now with First Nations where we have a prescriber, a clinician, and a case manager, and they come to you. So if that's your home, if we need to pick you up and take you to an appointment or help you schedule public transportation to get to an appointment, that's kind of what they're there to do, but it's kind of we come to you situation. And then just kind of maintaining that communication between the clinical team and the court to determine kind of how much the court needs to step in and infuse and enforce that order. And then we just praise, and reinforce as much positiveness as we can, because even the littlest milestones, we really try to acknowledge and praise. And so if you've been sober for a week, praise. If you let us come into your home finally after weeks and weeks of refusing to see our case managers, everything is just, we try to acknowledge even the smallest successes with individuals, because we find that rapport is key to everything. Rapport and trust, and these individuals allowing us to kind of come in and help provide whatever supports that they may need. And so I don't want to talk too much because I've been with this program for 5 years. AOT has been kind of had some hiccups along the way. We were operational in 2020 and 2021 with great successes. I think COVID had a lot of impact on a lot of things. It impacted us as well in terms of being able to successfully connect with treatment providers that would partner with us. So our program was dormant, but we are back up and running as of this year, as of January. And so we do actively have individuals in the program. We actively have space in the program. Thanks to Councilor Fiebelkorn and her colleagues, the city approved funding for next fiscal year. This program, assisted outpatient treatment, is funded through the city of Albuquerque. We have great support with the city in this effort. And so with that, I open it to questions.
Thank you so much, Laura. Maybe stop sharing screen. There we go, so we can all see each other. If you have any questions for Laura, please just raise your hand, or if you can't figure out the hand raise function, just come off mute and ask it, and we will go to James first.
Well, thank you for that. It was very informative. I would be interested in knowing two things. One is, what is your capacity? How many people could be supported in the program at a time? And secondly, is it actually practicable to engage or bring into the program somebody who is unhoused and therefore has no fixed location?
Well, okay. So to your first question, right now, we are working at a matrix of serving 40 individuals a year. And so we know that our community's need has way more need than 40 individuals a year. And so we're always looking at ways to expand upon that. We kind of have some ideas on how we might expand upon that as we get into this next fiscal year. But 40 individuals a year is kind of where we're starting from. As far as working with an individual who is unhoused, I will say that we have and will. Our only expectation is, as we go through the initial referral process, if we have someone who is unhoused, they at least need to have a way that we can communicate with them. So if they're unhoused, but they have a cell phone, or they're unhoused, but they check a particular number, or have someone in the community that we can leave messages with, we just need to make sure that we can meet with them and we can inform them of when court is, and there's a way that we can connect. And so we have been able to bring individuals into AOT previously who were unhoused. And so once we get them into the AOT program, I wish I could say that AOT comes with housing. We are still have the same options that any community treatment provider has in housing an individual. But we have a dedicated team. First Nations itself has a kind of housing navigation program that we can kind of wrap that individual into, where we can maybe get them vouchers or some level of short-term care where we could get them off the street while we're trying to apply for them some other kind of more long-term or stable housing. But the fact with AOT is that whether you want these services or not, we're going to give them to you. And so I think that's the one thing that makes us a little bit different, is so we do find that many individuals in the beginning are very resistant. They don't want it. And so what the expectation of our providers is that we have to exhaust every possible means that we can before we will say, we might need to dismiss this person out of the program. And so what we're looking for, or what our judge is looking for, is, have you tried to reach them where we know that they're going to be present? Have you tried to engage any of their support systems? We do have some individuals who do have some criminal justice involvement. Maybe they're on pretrial services. Have we tried to solicit the help of their pretrial officer to maybe wrap in some expectation from the criminal side for their participation? Have we? And so any idea that the team has, because this is very treatment team approached, with the judge being part of the treatment team. And so until we have exhausted all ideas and options to try to engage this person, then we kind of have to keep at it. That's kind of what these treatment providers that partner with AOT are signing up for, which is very different from maybe community-based treatment that people are familiar with, that is very voluntary, where it's like, okay, you've missed X amount of appointments, you've been X amount of times no show, we're going to go ahead and drop you. Whereas in AOT, it's like, no, okay, they missed 3 appointments. So that method isn't working. What else are we going to do? And so it's a little bit more kind of intensive without the community provider having the option of just saying, we're gonna on to the next, so that's kind of a little bit of a distinguishment.
Thank you, Laura. We have a question from Cheryl.
Yes, I'm interested in your success ratio, how you measure it. And I realized that because you're fairly new program and it was sort of interrupted with COVID, I understand that. So you might not have this information, but essentially, how do you define success and over how much of a period do you measure that?
Sure. So, I mean, with this program, successes are so individual, and we have seen success look differently. I will say that historically, what we do track is, so during the period of that individual's 1-year court order, we track how many interactions they may have had with our law enforcement during that time. How many times have they been in the hospital while they've been with AOT? How many times have they had issues with being displaced from their housing? And then we look at appointment compliance and we look at medication compliance. And so we do have a brochure that we have tracked that statistics from, that I would be happy to share with Councilor Fiebelkorn if she wants to disseminate to this group. But we have had a lot of success with medication compliance, with appointment compliance, because like I said, if we can't get medication on board, a lot of these other things are really difficult. And so we don't have an expectation of 0, but we do have an expectation that we're lowering those numbers, lowering hospitalization, lowering incarceration, putting more people into more secure housing. And so we're trying to shrink those kind of negative impacts.
Thank you. And that reminds me, Laura, I know I have that brochure somewhere, but if you send it to me, we will put it in the next newsletter so everyone has it, because I will tell everybody that when we met the first time on this program, those statistics were what made it go on we must fund this, and I have to work to make sure that it's in the city budget. So if you resend it to me, we will put it in the next newsletter that goes out in 2 Fridays from now. So
I sure will.
Okay, any other questions for Laura? Okay, oh, yes, Charlene.
Sorry, I couldn't find the raise my hand. I've done this a million times, but I still couldn't find it. Hi, Laura. So that was really, really interesting. And I think I was really particularly fascinated about the civic, it coming, not being through the criminal justice system, which I think is really interesting. But also I wanted to just ask if so I see that you're working with First Nations, but are there other like sort of cultural competency sort of programming that's involved in that? I think sometimes that's really important. And then I'm thinking especially, maybe just for the LGBTQ community and some other folks that may be coming from sort of a different, maybe various perspectives. And then going back to what I kind of brought up at the very beginning, which is sort of this holistic thinking about that, people that are dealing with some of those issues are not in their own, they're in a biosphere of interactions with their families and friends and things like that. And so I was just wondering if the AOT has some services for those folks that are supporting, not just their support for them, but also just separately in a way, like resources to guide them towards.
Yeah, so definitely. So AOT has a contract and partners with First Nations as our provider, just because we do need a case management service that is going to be highly connected to that individual who can't necessarily step away, when the individual doesn't want to comply. But with that being said, we definitely are very open to bringing in other entities into the team. And so anyone who's pretty familiar with First Nations knows that they work with the Native American population, but they work with all populations. And so obviously if an individual has maybe spiritual needs, that fall into what they do, we wrap them into that. But if an individual has needs kind of outside of what First Nations does, then that's kind of part of that case management, is finding an agency to partner with that would be able to meet those needs, be it religious or spiritual or holistic. The other thing that we really try to connect individuals with is peer support. And so if there is not peer support within First Nations, then we can find peer support with another agency that, will connect with someone who might kind of benefit from walking in the same path or having some of those same experiences or current struggles. So we do try to connect the individual themselves to some peer support in addition to case management. And then whenever it comes to friends and family, we have a really strong partnership with NAMI Albuquerque. And so I think a lot of loved ones really struggle with how to help and support, their loved one who has these mental health issues, because it's, the whole family or the whole support system is in this together. It's not just the individual. And so we do try to connect them with maybe some education on the diagnosis, some support for them. And then NAMI themselves has kind of resources on how to expand from that. And so we generally start there with that connection and partnership that we have with NAMI, and then we kind of try to meet the needs of individuals wherever, based on what their needs are.
So I think, and just if I could just follow up real quick, is that I think what's important to sort of highlight then on that is how important it is to fund the AOT, but then also fund the nonprofits and that are helping AOT create that infrastructure, to create that larger picture. I think that's really important to not silo, a great program like what you're doing from what the support is out there in the community. That's also really important.
Agreed, 100%.
Yes, definitely agreed. One of the things that we try to work on at the city in the budget process is like how to get support to the groups that need it the most, given that we have anti-donation clause problems and limited budget, but we do really try to make sure that those supportive services are all funded, in addition to work that are funding that comes from philanthropy and the general public. So I want to make sure, Nathan, do you want to talk a little bit about NM Solutions and HopeWorks and the assertive community treatment programs that you mentioned in the chat?
I'm not very familiar with HopeWorks, but I did work briefly with the Mexico Solutions on their ACT team a few years ago. I don't know how they're currently doing things, but it sounds very similar to this program, where it's most of the clients were people with severe mental illness, usually schizophrenia, sometimes severe anxiety and depression. And their team had a medical provider on staff, and we would deliver medications to patients, clients, take them on outings. We had company vehicles that we would use. Most of our clients had housing, but a lot of the case management work that we did as well also included making sure that they had housing, and if they needed assistance applying for disability, and like having all of their benefits so that they could maintain the housing that they had. I didn't really work on the case management side, but so I'm not as familiar with the details, and it's been a few years since I've worked there, so I don't know how they're currently doing things. But I was curious if this program was considering partnering with those agencies, since there seems to be some overlap with this work.
I will say that when we got AOT off the ground back in the end of 2019, HopeWorks was actually our partner at the time. And so they do and did great work, and continue to do so. And so I would agree that I liken AOT to ACT, or assertive community treatment. I say that AOT is ACT with a court order. So, because even ACT programs are voluntary, whereas AOT is involuntary, but the level of service and intensity of service is very similar. And so the way that, AOT chooses providers is just kind of based on request for proposal. We put the proposal out to all of the local providers, and then those who are interested will bid. And then, we choose providers based on that level of interest. And so we definitely are always trying to educate our local community providers about what AOT is, because I think having more option is great. But definitely I think those are two great programs that do great work. And I will say that previously, when we were operational, when someone was able to successfully be ready to graduate from AOT, then we do look at ACT programs as the step down, because it's very similar in handing that warm handoff. The services will look very similar, but it kind of takes away kind of like that court order, but yet still has the same level of intensity.
Thank you. Great questions, everybody. Anybody have any other questions or thoughts they want to share? And if you don't figure out the hand thing, just come off mute and talk. Okay. I want to thank everybody for coming for this conversation, and I really want to thank Laura for giving us her time to explain how this works. One of my continual concerns is, that line between voluntary and involuntary, and involuntary makes me very nervous, but I am very confident after having met with this team that this threshold is the right threshold to provide for involuntary services. And I just think that this team is doing really great work for our community. I'm really proud that I was able to make sure it was funded again. And we just really appreciate all the work you're doing, Laura. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then, everybody else, we're going to go ahead and stop recording now. And Laura, we're happy to have you stick around if you want, but we have about 5 minutes if anybody has